Our grandparents didn't just survive, they thrived in a world with no modern convenience, no smartphones, and often no steady electricity. They baked bread without machines, healed wounds without pharmacies, and kept food fresh without refrigerators. But here's the shocking part. The very skills that kept entire families alive just 70 years ago have nearly vanished today. Most people couldn't build a fire in the rain, preserve meat without a freezer, or even patch a torn shirt without tossing it away. And that's the danger. Because when systems fail, and they always do, it's not the gadgets that will save you. It's the skills. The quiet, forgotten knowledge that was once passed down at every dinner table and is now buried under convenience culture. So in this countdown, we're digging up 10 survival skills our grandparents used every single day, the very ones that could mean the difference between standing strong or falling apart in the next collapse. Stay with me, because the skill is number one. Almost no one remembers it anymore, and yet it may be the single most powerful survival tool of all. Number one, firecraft without matches or lighters. Fire is more than warmth. It's light in the dark, safety from predators, and the difference between a hot meal and an empty stomach. For our grandparents, fire wasn't just convenience, it was survival. They knew how to coax flames out of damp wood, how to keep embers glowing overnight, and how to use every spark wisely. Think about it. Matches run out, lighters fail. Even modern fire starters break down, but the skill of building and maintaining fire never expires. A few dry shavings, a carefully built teepee of sticks, and steady patience could keep a family alive through the coldest nights. There's also a discipline in firecraft. It's not just about striking sparks, it's about preparation, gathering tinder before it rains, splitting wood small enough to catch flame, stacking logs so they burn slow and steady instead of raging and dying too quickly. That rhythm of care is what separates a flicker from a life-saving blaze. Fire doesn't just cook food, it purifies water, sterilizes tools, and keeps morale alive when everything else feels lost. Even a small flame in the darkness can change how people feel, turning panic into calm and despair into focus. And then there's the forgotten wisdom, carrying embers from one fire to start the next, saving energy and effort. Our grandparents didn't waste matches when they didn't need to, they protected every coal like treasure. That tiny glow meant warmth, meant safety, meant survival. Stack this skill against today's reliance on convenience. Most people can't build a fire without fuel cubes or propane. But the one who remembers the old methods, flint, steel, friction, or even just the art of drying wood properly, is already ahead of the rest. Firecraft isn't just about flames. It's about control, patience, and independence. When everything else fails, this one skill can keep you alive long enough to use all the others, and without it, every other plan falls apart. Number two, hand-washing clothes. Clean clothes aren't just about appearance, they're about health, dignity, and survival. Our grandparents knew this well. Without machines humming in every home, they relied on their own strength, patience, and methods passed down through generations to keep fabrics fresh and wearable. The process wasn't random. First came the sorting heavy linens in one pile, delicate fabrics in another. Then, water had to be fetched and heated because hot water meant germs stood no chance. Soap wasn't poured from a bottle, it was shaved from a solid block or made at home from ash and fat. Every detail mattered. Then came the real work. Clothes were scrubbed against washboards, beaten against stones, or twisted and slapped until the dirt loosened. It wasn't just labor, it was a rhythm, a steady process that turned back-breaking work into something almost meditative. And every motion meant one more day that fabric could serve its purpose instead of rotting away. Drying wasn't automatic either. Without dryers, garments were wrung out by hand, hung in open air, or spread on bushes and fences. Even this step required skill, knowing how to place clothes so the sun bleached them clean but didn't wear them thin, and how to guard them from sudden rain or dust storms. What we see today as chores were, in reality, survival skills. Fresh clothes meant fewer infections, protection from skin problems, and the ability to stay warm and dry. A shirt that lasted years wasn't luck. It was care, repeated week after week. Compare that to modern life. Few people today could wash an entire household's clothes without electricity. Yet the ability to do so means independence from fragile systems. It means hygiene when hospitals are full. It means resilience when supplies are cut off. Hand washing clothes wasn't just about keeping clean, it was about extending the life of the fabric, of the person wearing it, and of the family relying on both. Forget this skill, and you risk more than dirty laundry. Remember it, and you carry one of the simplest but most powerful tools of true survival. Number 3. Hand grinding grains. Grain has always been the backbone of survival. Wheat, corn, rice, barley, these humble kernels can feed entire families for months. But stored as is, they're hard, dense, and almost useless until transformed. That transformation came from one forgotten skill: hand grinding. For our grandparents, the sound of a hand mill turning wasn't strange, it was daily life. Before supermarkets filled shelves with neatly bagged flour, families relied on small stone grinders, cast iron mills, or even simple mortar and pestles. Each handful of grain became flour for bread, porridge, and hearty meals that carried them through long winters. The beauty of this skill lies in its independence. No power, no factory, no packaging, just raw grain and patient effort. A few minutes of steady grinding could produce enough flour for a loaf, and that loaf wasn't just food. It was energy, warmth, and comfort, all drawn from the simplest of resources. Grinding by hand also meant control. Families decided how fine or coarse the flour would be. Coarse grind for filling stews, fine powder for soft bread, cracked grain for porridge. Nothing was wasted, and every option had a purpose. Compare that to today, where most people wouldn't know what to do with a single kernel of wheat. And here's the powerful connection: grain stores for years without spoiling. Machines may break, packaged goods may vanish, but a sack of wheat berries and the skill to grind them ensures food security no system can take away. Those who know it carry a renewable survival tool that doesn't expire. This is where convenience has betrayed us. We've traded knowledge for ease, forgetting that one small hand mill can keep a family alive long after store shelves go empty. Without grinding, grain is nothing but bird feed. With it, you unlock bread, porridge, soups, and life itself. Hand grinding grains isn't just old-fashioned labor. It's the bridge between storage and survival, between raw potential and real nourishment. Lose the skill, and your pantry becomes useless. Keep it, and you hold the power to turn basic grains into the meals that sustain survival itself. Number 4. Manual water pumping. Water is life, but only if you can reach it. Our grandparents understood this in a way most people today have forgotten. Long before faucets delivered instant streams, families relied on hand pumps to draw every drop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable. The pump stood as a link between effort and reward. A few firm strokes on the handle, and fresh water rose from the ground. There was no electricity to fail, no motor to burn out, no system outage to fear. The skill was simple: knowing how to prime the pump, maintain its seals, and keep it flowing. Those who learned it never worried about taps running dry. And the benefits went beyond drinking. Pumped water filled wash basins, kept gardens alive, and supplied livestock. It gave families independence from fragile grids, because the only fuel needed was human strength. Each bucket hauled up was proof that survival wasn't tied to machines, but to knowledge and persistence. Maintaining these pumps was a survival skill on its own. Leather washers had to be oiled, iron handles greased, and pipes cleared of grit. Neglect meant failure, but care meant decades of service. This relationship with the tool created resilience, something modern buttons and switches will never teach. Now imagine today's world. Few households even know where their nearest groundwater source is, let alone how to bring it up. Yet the one who remembers the old ways can secure water long after bottles sell out and taps stop flowing. That single pump, worked by hand, becomes as valuable as gold. Manual pumping wasn't just labor. It was a rhythm of survival, a daily ritual that kept families supplied through droughts, storms, and blackouts. Forget it, and thirst wins. Remember it, and you hold the key to life itself drawn from the earth by your own hands. Number 5. Cooking on open flame. For generations, the open flame was the heart of every home. Before switches and dials took over, families gathered around fire pits, wood stoves, or clay ovens, turning raw ingredients into nourishment. Cooking this way wasn't just about feeding people, it was about survival. The first step was control. Fire had to be tamed, not wasted. Wood had to be chosen carefully dry enough to burn hot, steady enough to last. Our grandparents knew which branches sparked too fast and which logs gave long, reliable heat. That choice decided whether a meal was properly cooked or lost to smoke and ash. Then came the tools. Cast iron pans, heavy pots, or even flat stones became the kitchen. Unlike fragile modern cookware, these endured the heat directly. A single pan could fry, boil, and bake, adapting to whatever ingredients were on hand. Nothing went to waste, because every scrap could be transformed into something edible over flame. Cooking this way also built resilience. Families could prepare food anywhere indoors with a stove, outdoors under the sky, or in makeshift shelters. Fire turned wild game into stew, tough roots into soup, and grain into bread. It provided not just calories but comfort, and that comfort often meant the will to keep going. And there was another advantage: preservation. Food cooked over flame lasted longer, smoke added protection against spoilage, and hot water boiled over the fire became safe to drink. In hard times, this knowledge was worth more than the food itself. Compare that to today, where most people panic if the microwave goes silent. Few know how to set stones for a cooking surface or judge heat by sight and feel. Yet those who remember these forgotten methods can feed their families no matter what fails. Cooking on an open flame isn't outdated, it's timeless. It proves that with the right skill, even the simplest resources can be turned into survival itself. Number 6. Hand tool repairs. Tools are the backbone of survival. A sharp axe, a sturdy hammer, a reliable saw. These simple items built homes, mended fences, and kept families alive. But tools break. Blades dull, handles crack, and teeth wear down. That's where our grandparents' skill came in. They didn't replace tools, they repaired them. Sharpening was the first lesson. A whetstone or file wasn't optional, it was essential. Every evening, after hours of work, a blade was run across stone until it gleamed. A dull knife wastes energy and causes injury, but a sharp one multiplies strength. That habit of care turned tools into lifelong companions. Handles were another story. Wooden shafts of axes or hoes eventually split, but instead of tossing them aside, new handles were carved from strong branches or seasoned wood. It took patience to shape and fit the handle, but once secured, the tool returned to service as if new. Nothing was thrown away, because every tool meant survival. Even saws and shovels found second lives. Teeth were reset with files, metal patched with heat and hammer. These weren't just quick fixes, they were lessons in resourcefulness. Knowing how to restore a broken edge meant less dependence on shops and more independence when it truly mattered. Contrast that with today. Most people discard a cracked hammer or bent shovel without hesitation, heading to the nearest store for a replacement. But in the event of collapse, stores will be empty. The only option will be to rely on the knowledge of maintenance, the forgotten art that once stretched every tool for decades. Hand tool repair wasn't just about saving money. It was about resilience, about building a life where nothing was wasted and everything had value. The person who can repair tools holds more than objects. They hold the power to keep building, fixing, and surviving long after others run out of options. A broken tool in the wrong hands is useless. In skilled hands, it becomes whole again, and that difference can decide who thrives and who falters when modern systems fail. Number 7. Homemade cleaning solutions. Cleanliness is often underestimated in survival, but history proves it's as critical as food or fire. Our grandparents knew that disease spreads fastest where hygiene is ignored, and they didn't have aisles of chemical cleaners to fall back on. Instead, they relied on homemade solutions that worked just as well, sometimes better. One of the simplest tools was vinegar, cheap, easy to make through fermentation, and endlessly useful. It wiped down surfaces, killed bacteria, and even kept pests away. Mixed with water, it became an all-purpose spray before such products had names. Families leaned on it daily, keeping sickness at bay with what looked like nothing more than sour liquid. Then came ash soap. Wood ash mixed with water creates lye, and lye combined with fat produces soap. This wasn't luxury, it was a necessity. A bar of homemade soap meant hands were clean after labor, laundry was sanitized, and wounds had less chance of infection. Skills like these turned basic household waste into a shield against illness. Even baking soda had its place. Used to scrub pans, freshen fabrics, or neutralize odors, it proved that a single ingredient could serve a dozen roles. Nothing was single-purpose, everything pulled double duty, saving resources and time. These solutions weren't just about cleaning, they reflected resilience. A family that could make its own disinfectants and detergents was less dependent on shops or fragile supply chains. When times grew tough, hygiene didn't collapse with the economy. It stayed intact because people carried the recipes in their heads. Compare that to today, where most households would panic if the shelves ran empty. Few know how to turn vinegar into a sanitizer or ash into soap. Yet the knowledge still works. It costs almost nothing and lasts as long as the skill is remembered. Homemade cleaning solutions were never just about tidy homes. They were about protecting health, stretching resources, and ensuring survival through simplicity. Forget them, and disease spreads. Remember them, and you carry one of the quietest yet strongest survival skills of all. Number 8. Basic rope making and use. Civilizations were built not only with fire and stone but with rope. Every culture, from sailors to farmers, relied on twisting fibers into lines strong enough to carry their survival. That knowledge is nearly forgotten, yet its value hasn't faded. The process begins with recognizing materials. Long grasses, strips of bark, animal sinew, even old cloth can be split, rolled, and twisted. With patience, 2 strands become 1 cord, and several cords become a rope capable of hauling loads or tying shelters. It doesn't require machines. It requires hands, rhythm, and practice. Strength lies in the twist. Each fiber locks into the next, sharing tension, resisting breakage. A properly made rope can lift buckets from a well, bind logs into a raft, or secure food high above animals. The skill transforms weak strands into a tool powerful enough to save effort and time. Its uses are endless. Hunters fashioned snares, farmers tied fences, and travelers lashed gear to carts. Even today, the same skill means securing tarps in storms, setting traps for food, or improvising stretchers for the injured. Wherever there is movement, construction, or danger, rope holds things together. What makes rope making priceless is that it doesn't run out. Store-bought cords fray and end, but knowing how to twist fibers means producing replacements as often as needed. Independence grows with every coil of rope spun by hand. This knowledge also strengthens the community. A single person making rope supplies others with tools for fishing, hunting, or building. It becomes barter, trust, and leverage rolled into strands. Rope isn't just utility, it's continuity, a bridge from resourcefulness of the past to survival of the future. Forget it, and you'll struggle. Learn it, and you carry strength that no collapse can take away. Number 9. Food preservation basics. Long before refrigerators and freezers existed, people had mastered the art of keeping food edible for weeks, months, even years. That wisdom wasn't luxury, it was survival. Preserving food meant surviving winters, droughts, and journeys where fresh supplies weren't guaranteed. Drying was one of the earliest methods. Meat, fish, fruits, and herbs were sliced thin and left in sun or near fire until all moisture vanished. Without water inside, bacteria couldn't thrive. The same logic applied to smoking, where wood smoke not only dried but added compounds that resisted decay. These foods fueled armies, explorers, and families across generations. Salting came next. Salt pulled water out of meat and fish, sealing them against rot. In coastal towns, barrels of salted cod and pork sustained communities for entire seasons. The method was simple, repeatable, and powerful. That tradition later evolved into brining, where saltwater solutions preserved vegetables, eggs, even cheese. Then came fermentation, a technique that turned preservation into added nutrition. Cabbage became sauerkraut, milk transformed into yogurt, and grains fermented into drinks. These foods didn't just last longer, they improved gut health and provided variety when options were scarce. Canning and bottling revolutionized the process further. Glass jars sealed with heat kept bacteria out and locked freshness in. Tomatoes, beans, fruits, and soups stored this way could wait patiently on shelves until needed. Combined with root cellaring, storing crops underground where it stayed cool and dark, families ensured steady food through harsh conditions. The real power of these methods is independence. A household that knows how to preserve doesn't fear empty shelves. Each jar, each dried strip of meat, each salted fish represents security against hunger. Food preservation is not just about keeping meals safe, it's about extending life, building resilience, and carrying the strength of the past into uncertain futures. Number 10. Hand sewing clothes. Before machines took over every household, sewing by hand was not a hobby, it was a survival necessity. A single needle and thread could extend the life of clothing for years, saving families from the cost and scarcity of buying new. In times when fabric itself was precious, this skill wasn't optional, it was a lifeline. The strength of hand sewing lies in its precision. A torn seam on a shirt, a ripped pocket, or a loose button might seem small, but left untreated, these flaws quickly grow. With steady stitches, a shirt becomes wearable again, a coat regains warmth, and trousers remain functional instead of being tossed aside. Hand sewing also gives complete control. Unlike machine stitches that often break all at once, hand stitches can be reinforced exactly where fabric takes the most strain. This means knees on work pants, shoulders of jackets, and elbows on shirts can be reinforced to outlast heavy use. Every stitch becomes a choice, tightening, strengthening, adapting to what the garment demands. The power of this skill multiplies when resources are scarce. A ripped coat in freezing weather can mean the difference between comfort and risk. A needle and thread, carried in the smallest kit, allow survival not by adding new supplies, but by protecting the ones already owned. Old fabric scraps become patches, giving new life to clothes thought to be useless. And hand sewing isn't limited to repairs. With practice, it can create entirely new garments from leftover materials, blankets from fabric squares, or simple bags to carry supplies. In emergencies, being able to craft or repair clothing from scratch separates dependency from resilience. Hand sewing clothes proves that survival often comes down to the smallest tools and the skills behind them, silent, simple, but absolutely indispensable. Skills like these aren't just old-fashioned tricks. They're proof that survival doesn't always depend on expensive gear or modern systems. It depends on knowledge of simple, forgotten skills that can keep you and your family alive when everything else fails. Think about it. While most people are scrambling, panicking, and waiting for help that may never come, you'll already know what to do. You'll have the confidence, the calm, and the tools that don't come from a store, but from wisdom passed down through generations. And that's exactly why we built this channel, to bring back the knowledge that could one day mean the difference between being a victim or being the one who makes it through. So here's my challenge to you. If even one of these lessons opened your eyes today, don't just walk away. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this is just the beginning. We're uncovering more forgotten skills, more survival secrets, and more strategies that can give you the edge when it matters most. Don't wait until it's too late. Learn it now, practice it now, and be ready before the world reminds you why our grandparents never took these skills for granted. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join a community that values preparation over panic, because the next crisis won't wait, and neither should you.